got Junior on the silver soldering, making another carbide scraper. Done that. Plenty of solder in there. Just wetted out the joint, and I can feel the heat from here. Keep it flat. So this is what we're going to make our carbide grinding jig out of, and this is a direct crib from Robin Renzetti, who showed it on his Moore style scraping video. I bought it new. Ironically, I actually had a slightly, well, a much better version of this when I used to do wood turning, and it was quite a handy piece of kit. I sold that for about 160 quid and bought this one 8 years later for under 40 quid delivered. So you've got standard grey wheel there whizzing round, output shaft on this end of the grinder, then goes through I think a worm gear on here, and it gives you something in the region of about 85 RPM this end. There you go. So I'm going to take off this paraphernalia, take the large stone off, which I'm not using, probably take the small stone off, have a look in the gearbox and see what's there, and then I need to come up with some kind of mandrel setup that enable me to put one of these 6-inch discs on. That's the plan for the day. Right, so that's the worm wheel. It's sat in two very thin bearings, if they're in there. I'm not bothered taking the shaft out. Basically, it's a 12mm diameter shaft, which is handy because that's the diameter of the discs. Then it steps up, then the worm wheel, and then it's through to there. What I can't see is where the end play is, where it's taken. I assume it's got a groove in that larger diameter, and then that's in there, and then everything's held in place with roll pins. That's like a phenolic or resin, and the worm wheels looks like steel, and it does actually look machined, it's not cast. So I'm not going to do anything with it at the moment. I'm going to put it back together and basically cobble up the drive. I'm wondering whether to mount it that way round, which will put the wheel underneath the worm rather than over the head. But I just need to check my heights. It just means that the thing's not sitting up here kind of thing. So I'll bring you back when I've done that. Alright, so a bit of an update. I've got the discs mounted now. I've made up a locking washer spacer and a spacer at the back there. It took quite a bit of pissing about trying to get that as a nice tight fit on the shaft, because the shaft was varying in dimension. There was 5 thou variation in it. So I've ended up, I made the holes undersized, and then I've hand finished the shaft with some abrasive paper. So that's on now. I've also swapped the gearbox around. I've decided that I wanted a more compact setup, so I've switched it over. Not least because what I found was I just fired it up and ran it, and there's a tight spot on the worm. So it's free now. It's not on the worm, it's on the worm wheel. There, it's just coming in now. There. And then it's free again. I'm figuring it's something to do with it being a plastic gear. It's perhaps got a bit of swelling on it, something. Anyway, it'll bed in, no doubt. So the next problem is to suss out some kind of mounting mechanism that without the wheel on the end of it. This thing's a little bit heavy at this end, so I'm going to mount it on a steel plate, and then I want some means of setting up a guide jig here to give me my inclined angle. So as the disc's running around this way, it grinds inwards. Stefan had used these discs on the high speed end of the grinder and done a sort of temporary, I think you've got a piece of wood mounted at the angle. So it's not got to really be anything fancy. What I do want is to be able to set it and not piss about. I want the angle to stay the same once it's set through whatever it is I'm scraping. So I started to take a look at the end of my scraper that I've just been using, which is this one. Now bearing in mind this has been cutting very nicely for me. Take the copper shim off the end, and what I've been doing is basically, come on, bit of contrast, right, measuring the angle on those faces. Now everything I've read and watched and been shouted about says that from the flat of the tool, that angle is somewhere between 3 and 8 degrees. This included this angle here. So best I can measure mine, ain't anywhere near that. Let's have a look, see. That's what it's supposed to be. So I've just some 6 degrees, and that's a long way out from mine. I'm getting something between 12 and 18. So what I'm thinking is, no matter what I do, I want this jig to be able to, so that I can adjust it basically. Because the way I've been grinding that is putting it up to the wheel on a very small tool plate, and then lifting the arse end of the handle to a point, so that could be 2 or 3 degrees out without, you know, varying between grinds. And what I want to do with this thing is to avoid all of that. So I'm going to make a 2x2 inch plate. That'll be what the tool sits on, supported on something fairly substantial, say around about 1 inch square coming off the base plate. I then want to be able to make that angle to the disc. So if that's the disc face, I want to make that angle adjustable by plus or minus 5 degrees. So I either make up multiple plates and make them a wedge shape, so that would be, you know, thicker at this end or thinner, or I make it so that I can actually pivot this somehow. The problem is with pivoting it, as it goes in to increase the angle, that front edge is getting nearer to my grinding wheels, which then means I've got to be able to adjust in and out as well, which isn't massively complicated, but the more adjustment there is, there's more chance of stuff moving when you're working along. So that's where I'm at, giving it some thought, and I'll bring you back when I've got a plan. I'm just getting set up to dress the end of the piece of carbide to then silver solder it onto the end of my scraper. The grinder's worked out alright. The last bit I was going to do was fit this diamond cut wheel on. The problem I've always had with these things is I very rarely find that the bloody things fit and run true on that face and on that face. The bore's too big for this. That was actually an arbor made for the Clarkson tool and cutter grinder, which, as you've noticed, isn't here at the moment. That might be that my arbors are just not accurate enough, I don't know. But it's bloody annoying when that thing's whizzing round and it's going ding 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 ding. Might only be a thou out, but it's annoying. So yeah, it's not the quietest running of motors. So I'm flattening the back of this piece off. Yeah, over there. You can see the brake line where it sheared it off. So flattening it off. I mean, it's a hell of a lot quicker than, it's not there yet, but it's a hell of a lot quicker than doing it on the green stone. I'll change the coarser grit on, so that comes off. So that's a 600 grit, that's a 120 grit. Because it's going to be bright silver solder, but come on, focus, come on. And it's pretty bloody aggressive, that, so it'd be handy for profiling. Anyway, so now you know. So our next job's solder that onto end, and then shape that side and that side, and then shape the end of it. Righty, so I've spent a bit of time just polishing up the back face, or the front and back. So that's a big pudge out of the way. That's how the carbide arrives, and I don't know whether you can see that very well. It still needs a bit of work, as you can see some deeper scratches. But I'm going to clean it up, finish cleaning it once I've got it brazed on. Regarding the discs on this, that's a 120 grit, and I bought a 120, a 240, 400, 600 and 1200, and then a 3000 grit, which is on the back face. I think that worked out at about £18 delivered, so let's say $22. I then bought some of these little flat hones, and I got basically, these are for the polishing up the back. So a 12, 15, 2000, 2500 and a 3000 grit, and that lot was a tenner. So not expensive. So the whole lot 30 quid. I think I paid more for that wheel, which I've still yet to manage to get it to run true. The 120 grit shifts quite a lot of material, but it's not actually that much faster than doing it with something like a 15. I've still got to do some trials on that, and what I found is lapping on the plates, a bit of Windoline seems to do the trick for a lubricant. You can do them dry, but it seems to just shift the slurry of carbide powder away. Right, so I'm going to clear this a lot away, silver solder the tip onto the shaft, and then polish it up, and then the last thing will be make up the handle. Don't forget to leave an air gap underneath your hot brick, or it scorches.